Miles had always believed he knew what terror felt like, until the moment he realized the child in his arms had his enemy's eyes. That was the morning he understood fate was either laughing at him or actively trying to kill him. The baby blinked up at him with storm-gray irises, the same shade as Elias Thorne's, the same man Miles had sworn to hate, the same man who had destroyed everything. And now Miles was hiding his child. Not biologically his, but his responsibility all the same. The kind of responsibility that could get him murdered in 10 different ways before sunrise. But this isn't where the story begins. Not his story begins on a night when Miles Beaumont made the single worst decision of his life, which, ironically, also became the only thing that ever made him feel alive. It begins in Arizona, just outside Flagstaff, under a sky so wide it made people believe in God. Miles wasn't one of those people, but he believed in Trouble. And that night, Trouble walked into his life wearing a leather jacket, smelling like smoke and pine, and looking like every reason he should have turned and run. His name was Elias Thorne, and Miles didn't run. Miles Beaumont had always been the kind of man who knew how to disappear. Growing up in the foster system taught him that keep your head down, move when you need to, survive by blending in. By 24, he worked at a roadside bar that tourists always confused for a biker hangout because technically it was. But he liked it. It was simple, predictable. And predictable was the closest thing to peace Miles had ever known. Until the night he walked into the bar storage room and found a stranger bleeding onto the concrete floor. A stranger with storm-gray eyes. A stranger who looked up at him like Miles was the first person in years who hadn't tried to kill him. "You're shaking?" Miles whispered before he could stop himself. "No," Elias rasped. "I'm trying not to pass out. There's a difference." Miles should have called 911. He knew that. Instead, he shut the door. Elias let out something like a laugh, something like pain. "Either you're incredibly stupid or incredibly brave. Or maybe I just recognize someone who doesn't want to die," Miles shot back. "You have no idea who I am." "No," Miles said, stepping closer. "But I can see you're scared." And that was the moment everything shifted. Because the man staring up at him wasn't scared. Not exactly. He was dangerous, cornered, hunted. But for some reason Miles couldn't name, Elias trusted him. Which was insane. And intoxicating. Miles had helped him that night, stitched him up with shaking hands, gave him his jacket, offered him a place to hide for a few hours. He thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Elias came back 2 days later. Then again a week after. Then he never really left at all. Their connection grew like a storm, fast, violent, beautiful. Miles tried to deny it. Tried to pretend he wasn't falling for a man made of secrets and shadows. Elias tried to pretend he didn't care, that he wasn't already half in love with the boy who patched him up with trembling fingers and sarcasm. But if there was one thing they both sucked at, it was pretending. Their story might have ended there, quiet, dangerous, intoxicating, if not for the mistake that changed everything. Elias belonged to a group of men who called themselves alphas. Not in the wolf sense. In the other sense. The dangerous, militarized, extremist group kind. The kind who believed power meant fear and loyalty meant blood. Elias wasn't like them, but he carried their brand on his skin, wrapped around his past like barbed wire. He'd spent years trying to escape them, but nobody escaped the alphas. Not for long. Miles learned that the night the bar went up in flames. He didn't even have time to think before Elias grabbed him, dragged him into the back alley, and whispered, "They found me." Then Elias kissed him. Hard, desperate, like it was the last thing he'd ever do. Miles kissed back, because he didn't know how not to. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Elias pressed his forehead to Miles's and whispered, "Run." Miles didn't listen. He should have, because that was the night everything shattered. The night Miles lost Elias. The night Miles lost almost everything. Nearly a year passed before he saw Elias again. Except this time, Elias wasn't the one he found. It was a baby. A baby left on Miles's porch with nothing but a note Elias had written in haste and fear. A note Miles read so many times he could recite it from memory. "They will kill him if they find him. He's mine. I trust only you. Please, After that, hiding the baby was automatic, instinctive, and stupid, because by protecting Elias's child, Miles had painted the biggest possible target on his own back. Which brings us to now. Miles held the baby close as he stared out the window of the rundown cabin he'd been hiding in for days, listening to the distant rumble of engines. Not thunder. Motorcycles. Alpha motorcycles. They had found him. His heart hammered, but his grip didn't waver. "Don't worry, little guy," he whispered. "I won't let them touch you." He just didn't know how long he could keep that promise. The door behind him creaked. Miles spun so fast he nearly dropped the child. At first, he thought he was imagining things. A hallucination born from fear and exhaustion. But it wasn't a hallucination. Elias Thorne stood in the doorway, breathing hard like he'd run for miles, eyes wild and locked onto Miles and the small bundle in his arms. "Miles," Elias whispered, voice cracking. "Is he safe?" Miles said. "For now." Elias closed his eyes in relief, but when he opened them again, something else burned there, something fierce and terrified and heartbreakingly vulnerable. "Miles," he said again, softer this time. "You should have run." "I don't run," Miles said quietly. "Not from you." Elias swallowed hard. "They're coming." "I know. And you stayed anyway?" Elias's voice trembled. Not with fear, with disbelief, with something like pain. "Why would you do that?" Miles looked down at the baby between them, then back up at the man he'd loved once and hated himself for still loving. "Because you trusted me?" Miles whispered. "And because he deserves better than the monsters chasing you." Elias stepped forward, slowly, like Miles might break. "You could die because of me." "Yeah," Miles said, "but I could also live. With him. With you." Elias's breath caught. Outside, engines roared closer. Inside, the air between them tightened. Elias reached out, hands trembling, and Miles thought he might finally collapse because after everything, after the betrayal, the fire, the silence, Elias was here again. And he still looked at Miles like he mattered. "We don't have much time," Elias whispered. "But I'm not leaving without you." Miles exhaled shakily. "Then tell me how we survive this." Elias stepped so close their foreheads touched. Together. A loud crash sounded outside. The Alphas had arrived. Miles tightened his hold on the baby. Elias reached for his hand. And for the first time in his life, Miles wasn't afraid of fighting. Not when the two people he cared about most were standing with him. Things were about to get dangerous. But for the first time in a long time, Miles felt alive. And this was only the beginning. The first gunshot shattered the night like glass. Miles jerked instinctively, shielding the baby with his body, while Elias grabbed him by the wrist and yanked him toward the hallway. "Back room," Elias hissed. "Reinforced walls. Move." Miles didn't need convincing. His heart pounded against his ribs like it wanted out as they sprinted down the narrow hall. The baby let out a frightened whimper, pressing his tiny face into Miles's chest, and Miles tightened his hold, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you." The cabin shook with another blast. Not gunfire. Explosives. "They're not here to negotiate," Miles said. Elias shot him a dark look. "They never are." They burst into the back room, a cramped space with a metal-plated door, the kind Elias had once installed when he was still living off the grid. He slammed it shut and threw the heavy lock. But the roar of engines outside only grew. Miles pressed his back against the door, panting. "They're going to burn us alive." "Not tonight," Elias said, scanning the room with quick, tactical movements. He was in soldier mode now, and it terrified Miles how familiar that version of him felt. "There's a crawl space under the flooring small enough to hide in, big enough for the three of us." "That sounds like a trap if they torch the house." "They won't torch it if they think you're still inside," Elias said. "We wait until they breach, slip out through the underground exit, and head north. There's an abandoned ranger station we can use as cover." Miles stared at him, incredulous. "You planned for this?" "No," Elias said quietly. I planned for every version of my life except this one. Except you. His voice cracked on the you. But there was no time for softness. The alphas were shouting outside. Tires screeched. Boots slammed against the porch. Miles's blood ran cold. What do they want, Elias? He whispered. You? The baby? Or both? Elias didn't answer. Which was the answer? Miles's throat tightened. You're not telling me something. Elias moved in close, so close Miles could feel the tremble in his breath. I'm telling you everything once we get out. I swear it. Another explosion hit the front of the cabin, much closer now. Wood cracked, glass shattered, and smoke flooded down the hallway. Miles's instincts screamed. Elias, crawlspace. Now. Elias dropped to his knees, ripping up a section of floorboards with the strength of someone running on pure adrenaline. Beneath was a dark opening, narrow and suffocating. But it was hope. He gestured for Miles to go first. Get in. Keep him quiet. I'll be right behind you. Miles slid into the hole, clutching the baby to his chest, heartbeat erratic. Don't you dare stay behind. I'm right here, Elias repeated, though the sound of shattering wood overhead almost swallowed his voice. When Elias lowered himself into the space, sealing the floorboards above them, the world went pitch black. Miles could smell Elias' smoke, sweat, pine, and feel the heat of his body pressing close in the cramped space. A moment later, heavy footsteps thundered into the room above. Miles held his breath. One voice barked, "Check the closets. Tear the place apart." "They're not here," another growled. The brat took off again. Can't keep track of his damn messes. Elias flinched. Miles reached for his hand in the dark, squeezing him silently. The baby shifted, letting out a tiny sound. Miles froze. The footsteps stopped. Silence. "Then you hear that?" a man said. Miles's pulse skyrocketed. A metal object scraped against the floor, directly above the crawlspace. Elias mouthed, "Stay still." Miles held the baby tighter, praying, begging silently. Then a gunshot blew through the wall on the far side of the house. Man down. Back paramaturgo. Chaos erupted above them. Bootsteps pounded away, shouts ordering the men to spread out. Elias exhaled slowly, trembling. "We have to move," he whispered in Miles's ear. "Now." They made their way through the cramped tunnel toward the back exit, an old service hatch that opened into the woods behind the cabin. Elias pushed it open cautiously, eyes scanning the tree-line. Clear. He motioned to Miles. They crawled out into the cold night. Miles adjusted his grip on the baby. "Where's the station?" 3 miles north. "Miles?" Elias said his name like a warning, like an apology. "We have to run." Miles nodded, jaw tight. "Then let's run." And they did. Branches whipped past. Miles's lungs burned. Elias ran ahead, clearing the way, then fell back to shield them whenever the baby whimpered. The danger behind them never felt far enough. About a mile in, Miles's foot caught a root. He stumbled, catching himself just before he fell. Elias spun, grabbing his arm. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Miles panted. "Just keep going." "You should let me carry him," Elias said. Miles's grip tightened instinctively. "No, he's safer with me." Elias's expression crumpled in a way that made Miles's chest ache. "Okay," Elias whispered. "Okay, just stay close." They pushed deeper into the woods until the sounds of the alphas faded behind them. But Miles knew they weren't safe. Not yet. Not even close. By the time the ranger station came into view, half collapsed, covered in vines, abandoned for decades. Miles could barely feel his legs. Elias slowed, scanning the area, then nudging open the rusted door. The station was dusty but solid enough to hide in. Miles sank to the floor with the baby, exhaling shakily. Elias stood over them, chest rising and falling with the force of a storm. "Miles," he said quietly, "look at me." Miles did. "You should be screaming at me. You should hate me." "Maybe," Miles said. "But right now I'm more worried about surviving the night." Elias knelt in front of him. "You shouldn't have been dragged into this. any of this. I tried to protect you by staying away. That went great, Miles said dryly. Elias huffed a small, broken laugh. I see that. Miles shifted the baby gently. Start talking, Elias. No more secrets. Elias hesitated, then nodded. When I left the Alphas, he began, voice tight, I didn't just walk away. I stole something from them. Something they wanted. Someone. Miles froze. You mean? Yes, Elias whispered. Him. Miles looked down at the baby, heart twisting. You stole your own son. He wasn't safe with them, Elias said. They wanted to raise him as a weapon, a successor. I couldn't let that happen. So you ran. I ran to the only person I trusted, Elias said, eyes softening. I ran to you. Miles exhaled hard. But you left him with me. Because I thought they'd kill you if I stayed, Elias replied, voice breaking. Because every time I look at you, I make the wrong choice. I choose you, and that makes you a target. Miles's breath caught. Elias reached for his hand. I never stopped loving you, even when I tried to, even when I thought it would save your life. Miles said nothing. Couldn't. Not yet. Elias swallowed. You have every right to walk away from me. Miles let out a weak, incredulous noise. You actually think I'd walk away now? Elias blinked. After everything? You're an idiot, Miles whispered. A brave, stupid idiot. But I'm here. I stayed. And I'm not leaving him. Or you. Elias closed his eyes, shaking. Miles, he said, barely audible. I don't deserve you. Good, Miles replied. Because I'm not a prize. I'm a problem with legs. And you're stuck with me. Elias let out a choked laugh and leaned his forehead against Miles's. The baby made a soft noise, and both men looked down. For a moment the world was quiet. Safe. Almost. But then Elias's expression changed sharp. Alert. Footsteps. Miles stiffened. They found us. No, Elias whispered. These aren't Alpha boots. Then who? The door swung open. 2 figures entered. Armed. Miles pulled the baby close. Elias stepped in front of them. But the taller of the 2 men raised his hands. Easy, he said. We're not Alphas. Elias narrowed his eyes. Then who are you? We're the people who want them dead. Miles exchanged a glance with Elias. The man lowered his weapon. My name is Jordan Hale. This is Avery Quinn. We've been tracking the Alpha organization for months. When they swarmed your cabin, we figured someone important was involved. Not someone, Avery said, eyeing the baby. Something. Elias stiffened. He's not a thing. Agreed, Jordan said quickly. But he's the reason they're tearing Arizona apart. Miles's pulse raced. You know about him? We know about Elias Thorne, Jordan said. Former Alpha strategist. The only one who ever got out alive. Elias's jaw tightened. We know he stole something from them, Avery added. We just didn't expect it to be this. What do you want? Elias asked, voice flat. Jordan hesitated. An alliance. Miles stared. A what? You want to destroy the Alphas? Jordan said. So do we. We have intel, resources, safe houses. You have something they want badly enough to make mistakes. Together, we could end them. Elias didn't speak. Miles watched him. Finally, Elias asked, and if we say no? Jordan didn't sugarcoat it. Then you keep running until they kill you. Miles glanced down at the baby. And him. Jordan's eyes softened. Especially him. Silence filled the space. Miles's heart pounded. Elias looked at him. Miles, Elias whispered. It's your call. Miles blinked. Mine. You're the one who kept him alive, Elias said quietly. You're the one they'll use against me. And you're the one I trust most. Miles breathed in slowly, out even slower. Then he stood. We'll work with you, he said. Elias exhaled shakily, the tension in his shoulders easing. But, Miles added, we do it on one condition. Jordan lifted a brow. Name it. Miles reached for Elias's hand. We stay together. Elias's fingers curled around his. Even Avery smiled at that. Jordan nodded. Then you're in. Miles tightened his grip on Elias and the baby, feeling for the first Tamiya spark of hope. Not safety. Not yet. But something close. Something possible. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the distant hum of engines. The war wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. But Miles wasn't afraid anymore. Not with Elias beside him. Not with a child depending on him. And not with the fire in his chest that whispered, "This time we don't run. This time we fight." Miles had always imagined that when the world finally collapsed around him, it would feel like a complete erasure, like everything he'd built, everything he'd survived, would simply cease to exist. Yet as dawn crept slowly over the Arizona horizon, casting pale gold across the ruined ranger station, he realized something startling. He wasn't collapsing. He was sharpening. Elias stood beside him, arms crossed as he watched Jordan and Avery prepare their gear. The baby slept quietly in a makeshift Cradlea soft blanket laid over the flattened padding of an old ranger backpack. His tiny chest rose and fell, oblivious to the storm outside. "He looks peaceful," Miles whispered. Elias didn't look away from him. "He does. Because of you." Miles tried to brush off the warmth blooming in his chest, but Elias reached out and touched his arm lightly, halting him. "I mean it," Elias said softly. "If I'd kept him with me, he wouldn't be alive. If I hadn't trusted you that night, I'd have lost him long ago." "You didn't trust me," Miles corrected, though not unkindly. "You panicked. There's a difference." Elias huffed a weak laugh. "Maybe, but I still chose you." Miles swallowed the sudden weight of emotion. "Well, now you're stuck with me." Elias's gray eyes warmed. "That's the only part of this entire nightmare that I don't regret." Before Miles could respond, Jordan approached, his expression serious. "We have movement. Scouts. 2 of them. They're not close yet, but they will be." Elias straightened immediately, instincts sharp. "They're searching the forest perimeter. They'll sweep this station within the hour," Avery added. "We need to move." Miles frowned. "Move where?" Jordan pulled out an old map. "The next safe house is 20 miles northeast. Remote. Good elevation. Perfect vantage point to track alpha movement." 20 miles. Miles echoed. "With a baby?" Elias stepped forward. "We'll take turns carrying him. But we're not staying here." Miles looked down at the sleeping infant, then out at the approaching danger he couldn't yet see but could feel like a tremor in the air. He nodded. "Okay, let's go." They packed quickly food rations, blankets, first aid supplies, Elias's knife, Jordan's rifle, Avery's makeshift signal scrambler. Miles bundled the baby securely against his chest, tightening the straps of the sling until the little boy fit snug and safe under his chin. "He fits you," Elias said quietly. Miles looked up. "What? You hold him like..." Elias hesitated, searching for the right words. "Like he belongs with you." Miles felt that land in his chest like a quiet, painful truth. "Maybe he does." Elias didn't respond, but the softness in his eyes said enough. They stepped outside into the early morning chill. Frost dusted the ground like powdered sugar. Birds flitted between the trees. The world felt wrongfully calm, as if unaware that death stalked them from beyond the treeline. Jordan took the lead, scanning the forest with silent precision. Avery walked beside Elias, murmuring updates about signal frequencies and what they'd intercepted from Alpha Communications. Miles followed close behind, adjusting his steps carefully so as not to jostle the sleeping baby. Elias dropped back until he was beside Miles. "If you get tired, tell me." "I'm fine, Miles." He smiled faintly. "I'll tell you if I need help. Promise." Elias didn't look convinced, but he nodded and matched his pace. They moved through the forest for nearly 2 hours before Jordan stopped abruptly and raised a closed fist. Everyone froze. A sound broke through the quieta twig snapping. Then another. Miles's pulse hammered. Avery lifted her weapon. "They're close." Jordan whispered. "Positions. Quiet." Miles instinctively backed against a tree, shielding the baby. Elias stepped in front of him, knife in hand. For several agonizing seconds, they waited. Branches rustled. Leaves shifted. A shadow moved between the trees. Elias tightened his grip on the knife, then a deer burst through the brush, darting across the path before disappearing again. Miles let out a breath so shaky it felt like deflating. Avery sighed. I swear nature's taunting us. Jordan rolled his shoulders, lowering his rifle. Move. We're not far from the ridge. They resumed the trek, tension still prickling the air. Miles's shoulders burned from holding the baby so long, but he wouldn't say a word. Not when Elias looked ready to fight an army alone. Not when any noise might attract the real threat. As they rounded a cluster of boulders, the ridge came into view, a steep incline covered in pine. The scent of sap and cold stone filled the air. Jordan pointed. Safe house is past that ridge. Another 30 minutes. Miles nodded, adjusting the baby gently. Then the baby stirred. Miles froze. The boy whimpered, then began to fuss, small at first, then louder. Miles rocked him, whispering, Shoo, sweetheart. It's okay. It's okay. I've got you. But the cry grew. Elias's eyes widened. Miles, I know. Miles whispered, heart racing. I know. I'm trying. A shout echoed through the trees. Jordan cursed. They heard. Footsteps exploded in the distance. Avery yelled, Move! Miles ran. Branches whipped at his face. His lungs burned. The baby cried harder, terrified. Elias kept pace beside him, shielding him from the side as bullets tore through the trees behind them. Jordan shouted directions. Left. Up the slope. Stay low. While Avery fired back, each shot a crack of defiance. Elias grabbed Miles's hand, pulling him faster. Don't stop. Don't look back. I'm not, but his foot slid on loose gravel. Miles stumbled. The world tilted. Before he could fall, Elias caught him, arm tightening around his waist. I've got you. Miles clutched the baby. I won't drop him. You won't, Elias said fiercely. Not while I'm here. Gunfire cracked closer. Jordan yelled, Almost there. The ridge steepened, but Elias practically pushed Miles up the final stretch. Avery covered their backs, firing with lethal accuracy. Finally, they reached the top. The safe house was just ahead, an old fire lookout tower perched on steel beams, sun glinting off its windows. Jordan sprinted toward it, already pulling out keys. Go inside. Now. Miles didn't hesitate. They barreled inside just as Jordan slammed the reinforced door shut. Avery locked the bolts. Elias collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. Miles slid down beside him, clutching the baby as the child slowly quieted, soothed by proximity and warmth. Outside, the shouts faded. Then silence. Elias turned to Miles, eyes trembling with 1,000 unsaid things. You saved him again. Miles shook his head. We saved him. Elias cupped Miles's cheek gently, reverently. No. You're the reason he's alive. You're the reason I'm alive. Miles didn't breathe. Couldn't. Elias leaned closer, voice breaking. I love you. I never stopped. Not for a single day. Something inside Miles unraveled. Softly, quietly, he whispered, I love you too. Elias kissed him. Not desperate, not frantic. Gentle. Full. Healing. A promise born in fire and fear and unshakable devotion. When they finally pulled apart, breathing the same fragile breath, the baby made a tiny sound content. Safe. Loved. Miles looked down at him, then at Elias. Elias smiled. We'll make it, Miles. All three of us. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Miles believed him. Because danger wasn't gone. The Alphas weren't defeated. But they weren't running anymore. They were fighting. Together. And for the first time in his life, Miles wasn't afraid. He was home. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.